Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
I expect more and more announcements about exemptions and reducing tariffs.
Amid tariff carve-outs already, BC's Premier calls on Donald Trump to lift all levies, while the opposition blames Victoria and Ottawa for creating an over-reliance on the American market.
I don't think I've ever seen British Columbia and Canada in a weaker position.
Plus,
don't push us around.
That will never happen.
Polls show an overwhelming number of Canadians do not want to join the U.S. So who are the few who do, and why?
I do think it's an idea for a broader union between us.
The Americans do not want to pay for global defense anymore.
And police say a child has been killed after being hit by a vehicle in Chilliwack. They are the third pedestrian death in that city in 2 weeks.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. North America's automakers are getting a break from tariffs with a hitch. The White House says the temporary break is designed to encourage the sector to shift more production and jobs to the U.S. Megan Fitzpatrick has more on the swerve.
Just 1 day after forging ahead with tariffs on Canadian and Mexican imports, President Donald Trump hit the pause button on the auto sector. Now, vehicles subject to the existing trade deal between Canada, the U.S. and Mexico will be given an exemption, but just for a month.
Reciprocal tariffs will still go into effect on April 2nd. But at the request of the companies associated with USMCA, the president is giving them an exemption for 1 month so they are not at an economic disadvantage.
The reversal came after Trump spoke to the CEOs of the big three automakers, Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, and after stocks plummeted Tuesday, including in the auto sector. They bounced back up today in the wake of the exemption news. The reprieve gives the closely integrated North American industry some breathing room to figure out next steps. The companies had hoped for an exemption from the outset, and when they didn't get it, they were bracing for a huge impact. Some in the industry warned plants could shut down within days and that cars and trucks would shoot up in price for customers. Trump made it clear to the automakers that if they want to avoid tariffs next month, they should bring their entire production lines to U.S. soil.
He told them that they should get on it, start investing, start moving, shift production here to the United States of America, where they will pay no tariff. That's the ultimate goal.
Overhauling the auto sector and how parts flow back and forth across the borders to make a vehicle won't happen overnight, says this expert.
Nobody's going to be moving a plant in 1 month, so we need to be clear about that. I think in best case scenario, if anything's going to move, it would probably take years to do that.
Levitt said Trump is open to hearing about other possible exemptions, but in his primetime speech to Congress Tuesday night, he insisted that tariffs are going to make America rich again. Megan Fitzpatrick, CBC News, Washington.
BC's Premier, meanwhile, says Trump's decision to offer an extension to automakers is evidence that the two countries are so intertwined, tariffs will punish people on both sides. Our provincial affairs reporter Katie DeRosa has more from Victoria.
Kentucky bourbon is stripped from liquor store shelves, marking the first salvo from BC in this trade war, and Alberta and Saskatchewan are following suit. U.S. President Donald Trump followed through with his plan to slap 25% tariffs on Canadian exports and 10% tariffs on energy products. Canada hit back with tariffs of its own on $30 billion worth of goods imported from the U.S. Within 24 hours, the U.S. announced a 30-day reprieve for the auto sector.
What the carve-out for automobile parts tells me is that Trump has realized in fewer than 24 hours how integrated our two economies are. And I expect more and more announcements about exemptions and reducing tariffs.
The official opposition leader placed the blame on the provincial and federal governments for creating an over-reliance on the U.S. for trade.
I don't think I've ever seen British Columbia and Canada in a weaker position than the failed governments of both the federal and provincial government.
John Rustad has pitched the idea of putting a carbon tax on U.S. thermal coal, which is shipped out of provincial ports. It's an idea EB has been open to, even pitching it to the Prime Minister. During a statement in the legislature, the Premier gave nod to the simple act of defiance by Canadian actor Mike Myers on Saturday Night Live, wearing a Canada is not for sale t-shirt and mouthing the words, elbows up. An indication from EB that the province could hit back with more retaliation if punishing tariffs continue. However, EB said BC cannot threaten to cut off the electricity source to the U.S. like Ontario has threatened to do. That's because it both sends and receives power from the Bonneville Power Station, the Pacific Northwest's largest electricity source. That power agency, which sources power from dams along the Columbia River Basin that extends into Canada, has faced major cuts by the Trump administration. As a result, EB says that's forced the province to look at backup plans for BC's electrical supply, including potential partnerships with Alberta and the Yukon. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
People in Kamloops have a head start in shopping local. Despite tariffs placed on things like meat, veggies, and baking ingredients from the United States, some neighborhood businesses have been catering to a BC First clientele since they opened. Still, as Shelley Joyce explains, that's not to say tariffs will not impact them.
Bananas are from Guatemala, product of USA, so I'm going to be putting it back. Everything else we have is Canadian grown or Mexican grown.
Shoppers poring meticulously over the fine print on the packaging. These peas are from Mexico, so are the zucchini, asparagus, and tomatoes. But the cauliflower, bagged salad kits, and packaged romaine hearts are from the States.
Most of the people are asking about where the products are from. Especially they do not want to buy the U.S. product.
Brody White owns the Chop and Block with his wife Heather. He says that though most of their meat is produced in BC, the equipment used to cut the meat is not.
This is a good example of American-made piece of equipment that is due for replacement. New, something like that could cost, say, $40,000. You add 25% off onto that, it kind of makes it unreachable.
And the smoker. It's American-made and won't get upgraded anytime soon. But all the beef here, steaks and roasts, come from local producers. Same with the pork.
Canada is a huge producer of beef. My understanding is it's a trade surplus with the United States. So I'm waiting to see what happens there. It's not often that we see a reduction in beef prices, but I'm kind of hopeful.
Right next door is a bakery and catering company. Despite all these delicious slices and pastries, belt tightening is what they do best.
Our business is not planning on growing. We are up in the air about everything that's going on.
Flour they can get from the prairies. Chocolate from Europe. He says prices have gone up at least 25%.
Even if you're buying a coffee from Mexico or down into Guatemala or wherever, it has to go through the States first before it comes to Canada.
Historically, people have turned to sweets when times get tough. And a lovingly created treat has been known to bring people together and lift spirits.
We've been through COVID. We've been through all these things. This is nothing new to us. It's not going to destroy our business. It's just going to piss us off.
Shelley Joyce, CBC News, Kamloops.
Chilliwack RCMP say a 3-year-old child has been killed after they were hit by a vehicle. As the CBC's Saurabh Sandhu explains, it is the latest in a string of pedestrian deaths in that city.
This morning at 10 a.m., police say at this intersection behind me, a tragic motor vehicle collision occurred, resulting in the death of a 3-year-old. Police say the child was a pedestrian and was at the intersection of Vedder and P.T. Wawa roads when they were hit, and that emergency responders provided immediate medical assistance, but the child succumbed to their injuries. The intersection is situated in the southern corner of the town, close to the Vedder Bridge, which connects this community with Cultus Lake on the other side of Chilliwack River. Locals say it's a high pedestrian traffic area with parks and trails nearby. The intersection has been closed to traffic in all directions since this morning. The Integrated Collision Analysis and Reconstruction Service are on the scene and investigating the incident. The 3-year-old's death comes after 2 other fatal collisions involving pedestrians in Chilliwack in the past few weeks. On February 17th, a man was killed after being hit by a car in the 3500 block of Boundary Road. The next day, another man was hit and killed by a vehicle at the intersection of Vedder and Promontory roads. Police say the driver of the vehicle remained at the scene and is cooperating with the investigation. They would not say if the speed was a factor. Police are asking anyone who may have witnessed the incident to contact them. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Chilliwack.
The family of Trina Hunt wants to know more about the circumstances surrounding her death. She was reported missing in early 2021 and found dead several months later. Her husband has been charged with indignity to human remains and was supposed to have his first court appearance in the morning. But as the CBC's Renee Lucas reports, it didn't go ahead as planned.
What do we want? Justice! When do we want it? Now!
Today's hearing was adjourned, but family and supporters still came to the courthouse in Port Coquitlam.
I just wanted to show my support and, make sure that justice is served in this case.
They held purple tulips, Trina's favorite, and drivers passing by honked his support. The 48-year-old Port Moody woman went missing more than 4 years ago. Her body was found near Hope just over 2 months later. The Integrated Homicide Investigation Team confirmed her death was a homicide, but it hasn't said how investigators reached that conclusion. Hunt's husband, Ian Hunt, is charged with indignity to human remains in the case. The date of his alleged offense is January 16th, 2021.
Justice for Trina! Justice for Trina!
Trina Hunt's family isn't satisfied with the charges laid so far.
Indignity to human remains charges placed 2 days before she was even reported missing. So you connect all the dots and they are only pointing in one direction.
The Justice for Trina Hunt campaign is offering a $50,000 reward for anyone who comes forward with information leading to a murder charge. Ian Hunt's first court appearance is now scheduled for April 23rd.
Renee Lucas, CBC News, Port Coquitlam.
A BC mayor who was censured over the alleged distribution of a book widely seen to promote residential school denialism has won a lawsuit against the city of Quesnel. Mayor Ron Paul successfully argued in BC Supreme Court that Council's move to censure him last April was procedurally unfair. Councillors removed Paul from numerous committees after reports he and his wife shared a book challenging residential school harms. Paul argued he had not been given proper notice of the meeting that stripped him of his official roles. A judge ruled on Monday that the resolutions against him should be quashed. Paul can now seek court costs from the city of Quesnel. Darius Madavi is here with a look at the weather. We had pounding rain yesterday, and then this giant glowing thing, kind of warm in the sky, appeared today.
Wow.
What's going on with that?
Is this the 1500s? What a description.
Indeed.
I think they actually knew more than that. Anyway, yes, some sunshine is back, and it will continue into tomorrow. We have high pressure building over the south, but this low pressure system approaching the northwest that will spread some precipitation pretty much all the way down the coast, although the amounts that we're expecting down here in sort of the lower mainland and the South Island are decreasing, as well as up in Whistler, lower amounts expected. So a few showers and flurries have continued through the day today. And if we take a look at our precipitation forecast, we'll see some cloud building in, sunny day tomorrow, then cloud building in into Friday, and then some precipitation starts to work its way down the coast, Dan, which could be quite heavy at times, especially for the west coast of the island.
Okay. Thanks very much, Darius.
Thank you.
Still ahead, polls show a very small group of Canadians seem eager to become American. We went looking for them to find out why. You'll want to see this.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. Stream your favorite CBC dramas or comedies 24/7 on demand on the CBC Gem app. Plus, you can live stream CBC Vancouver News. Check it out at gem.cbc.ca. And never miss a special programming series or contest. Subscribe to CBC Vancouver's e-newsletter at cbc.ca/Vancouver inbox and keep connected with us.
I'm Stephen Quinn, and I love living here in Vancouver, BC. It's a city with world-renowned beauty, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. In our new daily podcast, This is Vancouver, we're exploring the diverse range of issues and stories in the city, the good, the bad, and everything in between, as told by the people who live it every day. Don't miss This Is Vancouver, available wherever you get your podcasts, and I'll talk to you soon.
I think it's important to give a human face to the stories that we hear every day, the people that they affect. And I think talking to those people is what really gives us the true sense of the impact of the stories that we're hearing.
Polls show that 90% of people in Canada have no interest in being part of President Donald Trump's threatened so-called 51st state. But what about the rest? The CBC's Lindsay Duncombe sets out to understand that 10% and why they do want to be part of the U.S.
So I think Canada is going to be a very serious contender to be our 51st state. I think they have to become the 51st state.
We look forward to the United States beating our soon-to-be 51st state, Canada.
I say Canada should be our 51st state.
The threats pile on, and Canadians are angry.
We're nice people. We like to get along, but don't push us around.
No, proudly Canadian, I'd like to stay that way.
That will never happen.
But a few don't share that rage.
To be honest, I wouldn't mind having the American dollar since our loonie is tanking, but let me know in the comments and give me a follow.
There is a movement in Canada
to join us.
A pro-Trump reporter asked about them. Fox News is talking about it.
Well, Trump's idea of making Canada great again by turning it into the 51st state is gaining some serious traction, especially from Canadian citizens.
That's a big stretch. Polls show the overwhelming majority of Canadians in all parts of the country do not want to be part of the United States. Angus Reid Institute says 90% of us would not support joining the U.S. But who are the other 10%? And why do they want to be part of the states?
An online search leads me to Ryan Hemsley.
How did you feel when you heard Donald Trump say Canada should be the 51st state?
I was very excited. I've been dreaming about it since I was a kid. I don't actually believe that it's going to be a 51st state, but I do think it's an idea for a broader union between us.
Hemsley is 33 and just moved to Victoria from Calgary. He sells cars for a living and thinks he would be better off financially if Canada joined the U.S.
I know that just based on my work ethic, how hard I work, if I were to pay less taxes and have more access to trade and business opportunities, I know that I would be able to make more money.
Hemsley likes Trump, and he likes the way unelected billionaire Elon Musk is gutting government services.
Would you want that chaos to come here to Canada?
Well, it has to, because we have to fix it somehow. I'd much rather the chaos come here to quickly and efficiently deal with some of the issues Canada's facing.
Angus Reid Institute found support for joining the U.S. was highest in Alberta and Saskatchewan.
Yeah, there's a consistent group of the most alienated folks in the country that tend to center around these separatist movements and have for a number of generations now.
Take those poll numbers with a grain of salt, says political science professor Jared Wesley.
Most folks that have expressed this in polls to us have not really thought through the implications of it, and when tested on it, usually back away from those types of opinions.
There is overlap between people who support joining the U.S. and the separatist movement in Western Canada. This billboard in Bowden, Alberta, was paid for by a group associated with the Wexit movement. Longtime Alberta separatist leader Peter Downing now supports joining the United States. He says Canada should join the U.S. to guarantee security, especially in the Arctic.
The Americans do not want to pay for global defense anymore. They don't want to be the global policeman anymore. And whether you like that or not, that's not for us. It's not up to us to decide.
No mainstream political leader has come anywhere close to endorsing these views.
We will never be the 51st state.
It's never going to happen.
I see no enthusiasm for that notion.
There's a lot of overlap between these folks.
But what we don't know is what could happen if the economy tanks, says Shachi Curl from the Angus Reid Institute.
Canadians don't want this, but if we are in a situation where crippling tariffs are imposed and there is no relief over the long term, and or Trump ratchets up the pressure even more, it will give Canadians a moment for pause.
For now, Canadians are pretty much united. The 51st state doesn't fly. Tests of that resolve may yet come.
Warm weather at the ski hills at Mount Washington on the island. Is there more wintry weather to come? Darius has your BC-wide forecast coming up. Vancouver's cruise ship season has begun with the first vessel docking this morning at Canada Place downtown. The CBC's Jessica Chung headed out to speak with Americans about the ongoing trade war started by the U.S. president.
Cruise ship season officially kicked off at the port of Vancouver, and the first ship came into Canada Place from Honolulu, Hawaii, and on it a lot of Americans. And so we thought what a great opportunity to chat with some of them about what they thought amid the rising tensions between Canada and the U.S. after U.S. President Donald Trump imposed 25% tariffs on virtually all Canadian goods. So we did that, and here's what they had to say.
Canadians are so friendly, it doesn't seem to be like a good neighbor, does it?
It's surprising that they're doing it with our neighbors, but it's not unheard of being done before.
I think everyone's hurting. Gas prices are up with us, groceries up with us, and I think everyone's hurting. It's a tough situation for all around.
Being from California, I mean, prices are already high. We're feeling it. I mean, gas, food, I mean, eggs is, $10 for a dozen. We've always had such a close relationship with Canada, so right now it's just the unknowns, and it's just that can be pretty stressful.
I think it's his demented way of going, oh, I can negotiate if I put tariffs on things, but I don't support it, and the people don't feel that way with each other. We notice the effects. There's a lot of Canadians that are canceling travel.
I did have thought, am I going to get off this cruise ship and everybody's going to hate me? You know, I did think about that.
I feel bad for the president that we have right now, but I hope that Canadians can view Americans coming here not in a bad light because of it, because we're not all, supporters. We're not all really supporting this. It's kind of just, it's a sad time.
It's interesting to hear from people who live south of the border about this, especially during a time when the Canada and U.S. relationship is seemingly at its lowest point in more than a century. Now, an Angus Reid poll shows that while half of Americans still consider Canada a valued partner and ally, only 15% of Canadians feel the same way about their southern neighbors. Jessica Chung, CBC News, Vancouver.
A Surrey store that relies on cross-border business says its workers are caught in the crossfire of the trade war. And as Shaurya Chetri reports, other businesses are also bracing for layoffs and higher prices.
Now our business is down almost 45–50%.
Peter Raju is the president of the Peace Arc duty-free shop, steps from the Canadian-US border in South Surrey. It's one of the largest land border duty-free stores in North America.
And it's a big store. So there's a huge expense to us.
But with the U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods now in effect, the aisles here are nearly empty.
Today, the first customer walked in at 10:30 and just bought a carton of cigarettes.
Raju says business has struggled ever since Premier David Eby first announced retaliatory measures against the U.S. last month. Now that tariffs are in place on both sides, Eby is doubling down, urging British Columbians to think local.
If you have a choice about where to travel, to avoid traveling to the United States, to choose to visit somewhere in Canada or somewhere else in the world.
It seems people are listening.
We don't see any Canadian customers anymore, so we used to have so many Canadian customers during the weekdays. So they usually go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Fridays. So right now I barely see any customer.
And with fewer travelers, the store has had to make tough cuts.
We only have 3 employees working. We have a total of 28 to 30 staff.
Everybody is worried. So because based on the situation, we cannot give enough hours to our staff. We don't get enough hours. Nobody knows what is going to happen.
Job losses in other sectors are also coming, says a food systems expert.
For most of the businesses, approximately 30 to 50% at least is the human resource cost, or sometimes more in the food industry. And so it does make sense for the companies to, cut the axe in that category first.
Pratap Singh says prices on everything from groceries to electronics could start rising as early as next week. Other local businesses are also scrambling to deal with rising costs.
They're working out scenarios which could include potential job layoffs.
New forecasts say the trade war could cost BC 45,000 jobs by 2029. In its provincial budget, the BC government has set aside $4 billion for emerging needs, including tariff response. But those already facing layoffs say the fight between governments should not come at the cost of people's livelihoods.
It is a war between the countries, not between people.
Shaurya Chetri, CBC News, Surrey.
The U.S. tariffs are expected to have a significant impact on many parts of the Canadian economy, with small and medium businesses bearing the brunt of that pain. Quabino Oduro visited one Quebec company worried about Trump's trade war.
I'm at Algonquin Moldings in Maribor, Quebec. This is a cabinet and stair making company that sees 70% of their production go to the United States. This pallet right here, it's on its way to the States. It's going to Indiana. Over here is where they put the finishing touches on the wood before they package it. And when it's packaged, it's like this, and then the forklift comes, takes it over, and puts it with the rest of them that are going to the United States. There are about 50 to 60 employees that work here, but now with the tariffs in place, there's a lot of worry and uncertainty about job security here.
We can't really know before time what's going to happen. It's all about the uncertainty, not knowing if the tariffs are going to last, how long they're going to last, and how it's going to affect our customers in the States if the orders are going to keep coming in. So it's hard to reassure everybody since nobody knows what's going to happen.
And when we talk about job losses, are the employees worried about that? Are you worried about that?
I personally am, because we're at the mercy of the decisions that are out of our hands.
The company recently made efforts to expand production because of the growing sales to the United States. They installed these $12 million AI wood filtering systems to help cut lumber more efficiently.
The plant is running since 25 years to supply the U.S. market. Did the plant would run next week? I don't have the answer.
And when we talk about counter tariffs, do those affect you? If so, how?
Yeah, it affects us a lot. You know, all the lumber that we have to buy it either in the U.S. side and in the Canada side. So the counter tariff that Trudeau put in place, it will affect us a lot.
It's not the only Canadian business that's facing uncertainty now. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business says 20% of Canadian small businesses feel they won't survive prolonged tariffs from the United States. The federal and provincial governments are working on reducing the interprovincial trade barriers, so businesses like this one can increase their sales within Canada. They are also looking for new markets to partner with within other countries. For staff here, they are holding out hope that all this will work and that tariff wars won't put them out of work. Quabino Oduro, CBC News, Mirabel, Quebec.
Another small town in Quebec is also caught in the crossfire of the trade battle. In Stansted, the way of life is closely intertwined with its American neighbor, Derby Line, Vermont. So close, in fact, there's a library that straddles the border between both countries. Our Matt Demore has more on a recent visit that upset people on both sides.
This is the Haskell Free Library and Opera House, a more than 100-year-old building located in Stansted, Quebec, and also located in Derby Line, Vermont. The library was built on the border between Canada and the United States, which is marked by this line that runs through the building. At the end of January, the U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, visited this spot and did something that left staff here shaken.
So what she was doing is, when she was on the U.S. side, she was saying, you know, USA, number one country. And when she was on the Canadian side, 51st state. And she repeated 2 or 3 times.
So she was jumping back and forth.
Exactly, exactly.
As the trade war ramps up, what happened here has gotten quite a bit of attention on both sides of the border, as President Donald Trump continues to talk about Canada becoming the 51st state.
I worked at the border for 20 years and never seen something like that, you know. I mean, we received emails from people all over the United States saying that they are sorry about that, you know, that they are ashamed. People are dual citizens. So they have family, grandparents, they have kids on the other side. Everyone is a big family. So what's happening right now is shameful.
Staff say the library isn't political, that they just want to promote literacy and culture. But what happened here on the border line has become a symbol of simmering political tensions between 2 countries. Matt Demore, CBC News, Stansted.
Life on the ground as wildfires rip through BC towns. A new documentary shows us how communities are rising from the ashes. You'll want to see this. A new documentary is grappling with some of BC's most recent and devastating wildfires. Incandescence tells the stories that rise from the ashes of 2 different blazes and the communities forced to flee suddenly. Let's have a look.
A summer of fire has whipped around the world. Entire towns have been wiped off the map.
Thousands of people have been forced to flee their homes.
Hey, say goodbye to our house.
I can't believe this is happening.
We know we're on the front lines of climate change history right now, facing a fire season that is one of the most challenging we've ever experienced.
Fire's an insatiably hungry beast. And without intervention, it'll just keep going.
That is just a taste of Incandescence and its creators. The filmmakers are with us now. Nova, Ami, and Velcro Ripper, thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate you sharing your documentary with us.
Yeah.
That is incredible access you had. Give us a sense of how close you actually were to these blazes, Nova.
Well, we captured this footage in a variety of ways. We had a cinematographer, Vince Arvidsson, that filmed the majority of our footage with our subjects, including going to the fire line with BC Wildfire at one point. We also collaborated with a couple of BC wildland firefighters who were also cinematographers, and they were able to go to places that we couldn't go to.
So they got in even more closely.
Exactly. And also, one of our subjects, David Newcomb, is a former camera person, and as fire was unfolding in his community, he captured it all on camera. So we used his footage to support his story as well.
And I know David from being in the business for a long time. He is an excellent shooter. Velcro, remind us, what blazes were you close to?
Sure. We focus on the film on the White Rock Lake Fire and McDougall Creek Fire, which, as you recall, hit West Kelowna very hard.
That's right.
Yeah.
The devastation out of that. Was there something that you learned from this process that perhaps you didn't know before about wildfires? I'll start with you, Velcro.
Sure. Well, one of the things that surprised us was we always think of bad fire, but there's also good fire. And we discovered the practice of cultural burning, and we featured Indigenous firekeepers in the film. And they do this practice, which of low-intensity burns, which they've done for thousands of years, and they really help to slow down fires. And that was suppressed, and now it's coming back. And in fact, BC Wildfire is starting to work with Indigenous communities, as featured in the film, to do this.
Yes, and we've heard about that practice, and certainly BC Wildfire faced a lot of criticism from various communities. Nova, was there something that you learned in this process that perhaps that was eye-opening?
Well, you know, we really wanted to explore our relationship to fire, and especially in the context of these increasing megafires due to climate change. And, you know, we discovered that it's not so black and white. As Velcro mentioned, there is also good fire, and fire is good for the land. There are certain plant species that are activated by the heat of fire, and so it's not as black and white as we might think. Yeah.
What about the timing? There's a if I can call it, a lush sense of timing and pace of time passing in this film. Why was that a deliberate choice?
Well, we wanted to really explore the impact of fires on communities, on the landscape, and the impact on wildlife as well. So we went back to these areas in the Okanagan over the course of 2 years, 2 fire seasons. We went in the winters, we went in the springs, we went in the summer, to really explore the impact of fire and how it impacts these communities. And we wanted to have a film, or create a film that was very immersive, and so the pacing is more sort of conducive to that. Yeah.
And Velcro, when it comes to pacing and going back to these communities, what was that process like?
Well, I think a lot of times we hear about the fire when it happens, but then we move on, we turn our eyes away. But for communities that are impacted, this journey goes on for years and years, the process of trying to rebuild if you can. And so we really wanted to capture that and go through the cycle and focus also on the mutual aid that happens in communities coming together in crisis to support each other, which is such an important thing in these times.
For people who want to watch this film, where can they watch it? How access all of that, Nova?
Well, we have an upcoming film tour in the places where we filmed in the Okanagan that's coming up this week. And after that, there is going to be a Vancouver screening that's in the works. And then eventually the film will live on the National Film Board of Canada's website for streaming for free for all Canadians at nfb.ca.
Great. And Velcro, lastly, for somebody who goes and watches this film, what do you want them to take out of it?
I think to take away an immersive experience of what it's like to go through a wildfire from the point of view of people and also non-humans as well, and to really experience that firsthand.
Full circle in terms of nature. Excellent. Yeah. Velcro Ripper, Nova Ami, we really appreciate your time and you sharing this journey with us. Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Great to be here.
Now, southwestern BC has experienced several small but noticeable earthquakes over the past few weeks. Just after 4 this afternoon, officials say a magnitude 3.9 tremor was lightly felt in Victoria. For many people, it's raising questions on how to be better prepared. The CBC's Benit Brach looked into the early warning system and how to ensure it works for you.
Living here in BC, we've always heard how vulnerable we are to earthquakes, not a matter of if, but when. Now, we can't predict earthquakes, but we can detect them sooner thanks to the Earthquake Early Warning System. When BC's South Coast shook with a 4.7 magnitude earthquake in February, you may or may not have gotten an alert, or maybe it came later, and there were lots of questions about it. Here are some of the key things that you should know about the alert system. First, how does it even work? Well, Natural Resources Canada says there are sensors that detect the first energy from an earthquake. It's called a P wave, which rarely causes damage. The sensors send this information to data centers where a computer calculates things like the earthquake's location and magnitude. That gives a warning before the stronger shaking starts. And should everyone expect an alert? Not necessarily.
It doesn't send to everyone. It sends only to the people where there might be strong shaking.
The quake has to be a magnitude greater than 5.0, and it has to have an intensity of 4 or higher on the modified Mercalli intensity scale. That's also why an alert wasn't sent out on March 3rd, when another earthquake struck near Sydney. The scale describes that as many feeling the quake indoors, dishes rattling, walls making creaking noises, kind of like a heavy truck hitting a building. But after the earthquake on February 21st, there were still lots of lingering questions. Some people saying they got the alert, others said they didn't. We asked about that. Why is that? I mean, did the system fail that day?
The system actually worked exactly as it was designed. Detected the earthquake, determined it was above thresholds.
Natural Resources Canada says the EEW system sent a message to another system. This is the National Public Alerting System, and indicated where to send the warning for the public. Then, this system sent messages to broadcast media and cell providers to fire off all these alerts. The agency says it's not an error in the system if you felt the earthquake and didn't receive an alert. It may simply mean that you are not in a zone of serious danger. And there might be other reasons why you don't get the alert. For example, you might be in a location where it's hard to get signal, like an underground garage, or your phone might only be set to Wi-Fi only. But Natural Resources Canada also acknowledged that after this earthquake, it received reports that some people who got the alert were outside the immediate risk area, some intended recipients didn't get it, or that some alerts may have been received after a short delay. In a statement, the agency writes that such issues have been reported after other activations on NPAS in the past, and they are inherent in the nature of the system, and that there will be a review to take the lessons and track reports for the future.
There is some inconsistency in how cell alerting happens, and we are in discussions with cell providers about this so that this can be improved in the future.
And just to really make sure that your device can get an alert, here's what else you can do. Visit Alert Ready or contact your wireless service provider. It tells you if your device is compatible with the alert. Generally, your phone needs to be able to connect to LTE. Make sure your phone is updated with its latest operating software. And again, your phone has to have LTE connection during the emergency to get an alert. And when it comes to the technology, one expert says it can really allow critical infrastructure to take immediate action, such as halting traffic from driving onto bridges or into tunnels. But
we are not real time yet. But I think technology as of now, 2025, it should be readily available, and we should not have such a discrepancy between different users.
He says overall, the tech is still improving, and it's yet again another reminder to be proactive and be earthquake ready. Vineet Brach, CBC News, Vancouver.
Darius Madavi is here with our BC-wide weather forecast. Before we get to that, Darius, we've covered wildfires, earthquakes, and you have something else you want to talk to us about when it comes to the natural world.
Yeah, natural disaster block, I guess. This is not a disaster. Things are not trending in the right direction, but we're in a similar spot to where we were last week if we're looking at the province as a whole. Back on February 15th, when we got our last update, we were about 22% below normal province-wide in terms of snowpack levels, and as of the last update with data as of March 1st, but came out a couple days ago, 22% normal, still 22% below normal. So 78% of the normal snowpack, which makes it sound like we haven't seen any change in the last 2 weeks, but we did see pretty major change in weather. February started out being very dry and cold and ended up being, the last couple of weeks were very warm and wet. And that meant some changes in specific places that sort of averaged out to give us a similar picture province-wide. We saw significant decreases in snowpack levels in the West Kootenay region in particular, 17 percentage point loss in snowpack levels there, just because of those warmer conditions driving melt. Same in the Liard region up in which covers most of the northeast. We saw increases, though, this was about 9% loss. In terms of increases, though, we saw that in the Nechako and Upper Fraser West regions, which cover much of central BC. And if we take a look down here, Vancouver Island also saw an increase of about 6 percentage points. The highest increase was the Upper Fraser West region, which saw a 25% increase in snowpack levels. So some gains, some losses, averaging out to a still below average snowpack for the year, but much better than last year when we set record lows throughout much of the season. If we take a look at our precipitation forecast, we won't see too much more snow on the way in the weeks ahead, in the week ahead, but some very significant rainfall. Freezing levels are high enough that most of it will be coming as rain, especially for the west coast of the island, but there will be some precipitation coming. You'll notice for the west coast of the island, could be a pretty significant rainfall event with as much as maybe 100 millimeters of rain coming to some parts of the west coast of the island, populated parts even, and inland sections that are less populated, probably seeing even more than that. We'll talk about those accumulations in a second, but for now you can see that system coming down, hitting the northwest, coming down at the coast, breaking into the interior at times. You'll see some snow in the interior, just not so much on the coast, except for at those highest elevations up in the Alpine. So potentially some good dumps for ski resorts, but here on the lower mainland, up in Whistler and the South Island, those expected totals have been coming down, trending down. So be aware of that. Here are our expected precipitation totals across the province. If we zoom in on the island, you can see Tofino, Ucluelet expecting very high totals in terms of that precipitation. Again, that is going to be rain. This isn't showing snow, but those highest elevations, Alpine, will be getting some snow. And here's the lower mainland. There may be some more rain coming on Sunday as well. These models just don't run out that far. So we'll talk more about that and have a better picture of that tomorrow. Conditions across the province tomorrow look like we're going to have a decent amount of sunshine, and temperatures are quite mild across BC. Be aware of that. And lastly, here is our forecast for Metro Vancouver. We've got plenty of showery activity possible on the way and very mild temperatures.
Okay.
Dan?
Darius, thanks very much.
Thank you.
People in one Okanagan community have all sorts of thoughts about exotic birds that have returned 3 years later. You'll want to see this.
The reported sightings of 2 young peacocks in Naramata has residents buzzing about the possible return of the exotic birds to the Okanagan community.
One which has a storied history with the colorful creatures. Have a look.
Spring right now, so we're all in our gardens trying to there are lots of victory gardens going in. One of our Naramatians posted a picture of a peacock. I think they were on a power line just hanging out. They were dropped somewhere downtown Naramata, and that's where they are. They're roaming around checking out the place, seeing if they want to hang out. So not everybody loves them. So there'll be more, you'll start to see stuffies on cars that have been targeted by the peacock, as I like to sit on this car and scratch this car and poop on this car. As far as I remember, they've always been in the village forever and ever. And there was a peahen and at least one peacock, obviously. Then all of a sudden there were babies. And then one winter, I think somebody took them in and they survived their first winter. And then that was it. We had a whole bunch of peacocks in the village. They made themselves known in the village, right? They would come out. You'd be walking down the street with your ice cream cone in hand, and then all of a sudden there's like, am I looking at this peacock? Like, what is happening? And the peacocks loved it. And every Thursday morning, you could sit at the coffee shop and watch the peacock chase the garbage truck down the road, up and down the road, all over Naramata. It was ridiculous.
Beautiful plumage. Many of you will get that.
Not me.
Okay.
Did you know that peacocks are only the males? The females are peahens.
Peahens.
And the term for the whole species is peafowl.
Peafowl. So we're learning all sorts of new things. Peafowl and Naramatians.
Oh, I missed that one.
Was it Naramatites?
It's good to know, too.
Yep. Here come the angry emails. I have, yes. I don't know if I've been chased by one, but yes. Picked up a feather or two.
I have. In a zoo in Germany, peacock chased me down the thing.
Explains a lot.
Yeah. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, YouTube, and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And we'll have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Good night.